Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I must be insane, I reminded myself as I stared at my image in the mirror and almost changed my mind again, but I did not. I saw a lady in her early 40s with long red hair and large green eyes that had narrowed with determination. I stared down at my solid, well-proportioned physique and stroked my hands erotically down my side and across my hips. I opted to maintain the black lace bra and matching panties I had already picked and then grabbed for my pants. I slipped them on, a passing thought reminding me that I needed to iron Daniel's pants and shirts before putting them away. I smacked the notion down and put it aside. It had no relevance to what I was doing. I struggled to get the button into the slot and exhaled deeply. I needed to do that simply to button my jeans. I knew they were a size too small, but Daniel loved them, as did I. Again, the undesired idea entered my head as I stared at the curvature of my hips and the skin-tight fit of the jeans on my thighs, particularly where my legs met. I loved how I appeared while wearing them. I knew I should have let them out or donated them, but these jeans were just what I wanted to wear today. I convinced myself, almost angrily, that Cole would like them as well. I flushed at my own thoughts before draping an enormous shirt over my head to conceal the translucent blouse. I made sure the neck was snug and showed no white, and that the bottom hung down over the firm swells of my buttocks. I glanced at myself again, making a turn to reveal all of myself, and concluded it was wonderful. The legs were a bit too tight, but Daniel wouldn't notice my trousers with this top, and he had no idea what was below. He'd believe I was simply wearing my regular trousers and sweater, complete with my androgynous appearance. That notion triggered a momentary burst of rage, which swiftly subsided. I calmed my thoughts and went downstairs to find Daniel, my 15-year-old husband, and my two 15-year-old children, Lily and Mason, sitting together in the kitchen talking about their afternoon plans. They were fraternal twins who looked nothing alike. Lily was pleased with the outcome, although Mason wasn't too concerned. In my opinion, they were both lovely and wonderful. Right now, they were all smiling and sharing a secret, which was not uncommon for their family. They weren't really secrets, our family was well-adjusted and healthy, and we talked our difficulties openly and freely, but the mere mention of a secret sparked some well-meaning arguments, just good family fun. I sat down and listened for a few minutes, not really caring what they were discussing. I simply wanted to glance at my family again before proceeding with my plans for the day. I began by looking at Lily, my unconditionally beloved daughter. Her appearance mirrored mine. She was tall for her age, taller than her brother, and likely to remain so into high school. She was cute, with her red hair worn long and straight with bangs over her forehead, giving her enormous green eyes a constantly astonished expression. She was well proportioned for her height, without the gaunt appearance that many adolescent females maintain until late in their growth. To top it off, she was brilliant and clever. Mason was more like his father. Daniel and Mason were both short and bulky. Daniel was just 3 inches taller than I was, and Mason was not far behind. Daniel had a well-built chest and shoulders, and his hips narrowed over powerful, muscled thighs, but Mason had yet to grow into his bones. He was almost as tall as his father, but his physique lacked the solid definition that comes with maturity. They both had light brown hair, grey eyes, and a wicked sense of humor. That sense of humor drove Lily insane at times, but she knew it was all in good fun. I adored and valued it. When they eventually slowed down, I caught their attention and requested to go over my list again. This was a list of necessities that I would pick up on my monthly shopping excursion to the mall. I had always enjoyed shopping, although Mason and Daniel despised it. Lily would go, but only with her buddies. Going to the mall with her mother was not okay, so I made plans to go alone, armed with my list. Today was a bit different, but no one knew how unusual it would be. They simply knew this was my routine, which they all accepted. I counted on that as I went over what each of them requested. As I completed this assignment, I mentally evaluated the products I had previously bought. I started my list earlier and went to the mall multiple times over the previous 3 weeks to get as many of the goods as possible in advance. The twins had added additional last-minute items to the list during the previous several days, but that wasn't an issue. I intended to spend at least half an hour in the mall before heading to my actual destination. I could do my shopping in that time. As they concluded commenting on my attention to their unique needs, I felt a twinge of remorse that I immediately brushed away. I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going to reverse it now. This afternoon had been planned for about a month, and I was more than prepared. I'd started preparing it practically soon after the previous one. Only I and one other person knew about my intentions for this Sunday afternoon, and he was not a member of my family. To be true, the choice to do this had not come easily. It took a lot of argument and persuasion with myself before I decided it was something I really wanted to accomplish. Even when I made my choice, the fighting did not end. Just this morning, before I started getting ready, I was still trying to decide. I nearly decided not to go forward, but a remark from Daniel convinced me. It was obviously nothing significant, yet it felt so much more to me. Daniel had not been particularly honest with me lately, which was partly my fault, but I thought I had my reasons, and Daniel was unwilling to address them with me. We hadn't been intimate in a long time, and we were barely tolerating one another. I gradually persuaded myself that everything that went wrong was his fault. This morning was usual. I had made a proposal for supper, asking Daniel to order something so I didn't have to cook anything. Daniel volunteered to handle the cooking, but instead of appreciating his offer, I shouted at him, as I had been doing recently, and asked him why he couldn't simply do what I said. He remained silent for a while before saying he'd do it my way. He walked away and went downstairs. I was still irritated over his attitude, but I wasn't sure why. It felt like everything he did right now was enough to make me upset. As I prepared my belongings for my journey to the mall, my thoughts wandered. I waved distractedly at the kids as they screamed farewell, and am not sure whether Daniel said anything. I was still thinking about it as I pulled out and headed toward the large retail mall only a few miles from our house. My mind was wandering over my life and marriage, looking for any explanation for my planned acts. Daniel and I were married in the autumn of 2006. Daniel was a chemical engineer working for a prominent consulting business, one of many young engineers advancing through the management ranks. Daniel was one of the better ones, and his future looked promising. He was 31 and already a group leader, with prospects of further promotions. He was gorgeous, smart, and ready for fun. I met him at one of the local pubs when out with several of the females from my workplace. I worked as a legal secretary for a company that specialized in business law. I had a degree in languages and could translate from German and Spanish into English. Those were my areas of competence, and I was compensated appropriately. I was 27 years old and had just ended a lengthy but unhappy relationship with a guy whose only claim to fame was his beautiful looks and stories about his incredible sexual skills. I agreed with the former but not the latter. Our separation was amicable, and I found myself with a lot of free time. Going out with the ladies was one way to spend part of that time. We met when I was in the bar waiting for a drink. I had the distinction of purchasing around, and I was waiting for the bartender to finish my order of 3 whiskey sours and 2 gin and cokes when Daniel approached me from behind. I didn't notice he was there and backed into him while reaching for my wallet. I excused myself, but when I turned, his smile took me by surprise. He grinned larger when he spotted me and continued, "I would apologize, but that would be a lie." It was actually quite pleasant. I was prepared with a clever retort, but after staring into his innocent grey eyes, I choked back my words and returned his grin. I chose to respond in kind and delighted you loved it. It was absolutely my pleasure. He chuckled, which drew my attention, and I asked for his assistance in returning the tray of beverages to my table. He followed. I laid the drinks down and extended my hand towards him. "Hi, my name is Sophia Matthews." "Sophia to most of my friends." He responded, "Glad to meet you, Sophia. My name is Ethan Benson. Would you care to join me? In with some other guys as well, but we could get a table for the 2 of us." I was taken aback by his abrupt request, but I immediately made a choice. "I'd be happy to, just let me tell my friends and then we can find a table." I returned my gaze to my group, but they had been watching and listening, and their smiles indicated that they agreed with my choice. I chatted with Sarah, the girl I was most likely to go home with, and assured her that I could handle. She laughed and smacked my back. Ethan then escorted me over to an empty table and went off to chat to his own pals once I was seated. He returned, and we spent the whole evening together. That marked the beginning of our courtship. Over the following 6 months, we went from boyfriend and girlfriend to lovers before moving in together. We got a little flat and started our lives together. It wasn't long before we decided to make it permanent by marrying. Both Ethan and I kept our jobs and we started saving for a little home. Ethan was promoted twice throughout that period and was now a regional manager, overseeing a team of 5 engineers. His future prospects at the corporation seemed to be bright. I was still working at the law company, doing pretty much the same job, but the money was fantastic, and it helped us get closer to the day when we could afford to buy a house. We continued this manner for the following 2 years until I told Ethan I was pregnant. He was so excited that he couldn't stop contacting people and talking about being a parent. I was glad he was pleased, but I was also approaching the point when I would have to stop and remain at home with the infants. We both decided that I would remain at home and raise children for the first 5 years. That was my option, and Ethan gladly agreed to it. We discovered the house, made an offer, and once it was approved, we signed the paperwork to become homeowners. It was a magnificent home with 3 bedrooms and a spacious yard, complete with a swing set left by the previous owners. It had a fence surrounding the backyard, and we worked on making it safe for children. Our twins were delivered without incident, and we took them into the nursery that we had prepared. It contained 2 beds, 2 lights, and everything a newborn needed to wear. It was amazing, and I loved everything about it. I settled in with my new family and have never looked back. Throughout our relationship, one thing remained constant: Ethan and I loved one another, and we showed it every day. I would prepare his favorite dishes and made sure he got his favorite drink on weekends. He would give me flowers at least once or twice a month, and he was constantly curious about my day and how the kids were doing. We sat together each evening after the kids went to bed and snuggled. Ethan or I would start sexual activity at least twice a week, if not more. It was the sweetest kind of lovemaking for me, and it was equally fulfilling for Ethan. Ethan was a diligent engineer, but he never allowed his career consume his life. He would bring work home, but only while the children were resting, bathing, or eating. He performed his part, but when work became required, I took over the child tasks until he completed. But that was unusual, and he never made it a routine. If Ethan had to pick between career and family, he would always choose the latter. I admired that about him. As the kids got older, I felt restless and asked Ethan whether he would mind if I returned to work. He claimed he had no issues as long as it made me happy. Ethan and I discussed it, devised a schedule of tasks to be completed from home that we thought would work for both of us, and I applied for jobs with my previous company and a handful of others in town. I was fortunate to get 2 offers. Ethan and I discussed it, and I decided to return to my former company, even if the pay wasn't as excellent. However, given Ethan's current position, money was not the primary motivator. My previous employer provided flexible hours, and my schedule could be changed. That made the difference for both Ethan and myself. I accepted and returned to work when the twins were 8 years old. At the moment, I believe it was the beginning of the transformation in our relationship. Was this my fault? I'm not sure, but if I had to guess, I would say definitely. I understand that returning to work meant a new life for me, one that was quite different from operating a household with 2 children and a spouse. As the years passed and I grew more absorbed in my career, I no longer had time to prepare those special dinners we always enjoyed or to keep the fridge stocked with Ethan's favorite beer and the twins' favorite sodas. Snacks would often run out, forcing Ethan or myself to make a shopping trip for basics. Weekends became a time to do tasks that were left undone during the week, and we discovered that we had less time to just sit and speak and snuggle. And certainly, things have changed. Despite all that had happened, we both strove to preserve our love life. We believed it was critical not to lose the closeness and intimacy that we had during those times. It wasn't always about sex, but rather about closeness. Some evenings we'd just fall asleep in one another's arms. As a consequence, nothing changed in the bedroom until around a year ago. I recall that night as if it were yesterday. I was working on a significant case that required a lot of essential translations, so I had to spend a lot of time researching technical words and scientific notation. It was occupying all of my days, and I had to extend it into the nights. I'd bring my work home, hustle to make a fast supper, usually takeaway, and then urge the twins and Ethan to clean the dishes and the kitchen while I ran off to the little den to continue my online study. That went on for a while, and my nights grew more busy. I was often late for bed, and Ethan was usually sleeping when I arrived. When he wasn't, he'd grab for me, and I'd swat him away in frustration. I reminded myself that he was just thinking about himself. Why couldn't he see how exhausted I was? I needed to sleep so that I could continue working on my job the following day, just like he did. He talked nothing those evenings, turned over, and fell asleep. I never gave it much attention, I was simply glad I could sleep. Then, one night, when I had gone to bed late, ready to sleep, my eyelids so tired that I could hardly make it up the stairs, Ethan grabbed for me as I slipped beneath the covers. I didn't react, too exhausted to swat his hand. He reached down between my legs and rubbed me. At first, the experience was so good that I laid there enjoying it until the discomfort returned. I needed to sleep, damn it. Why didn't he leave me alone? I responded angrily, pushing his hands away. Then I let him have it. Damn it, Ethan. I need to get some sleep. Can't you keep your damned hands to yourself? Just leave me alone. With a brief flash of shame, I continued saying, maybe this weekend we can get together. I turned over, placed the pillow over my head, and attempted to fall asleep. My heart was pumping with rage, and my stomach was seething, the acid scorching. But it wasn't long before I fell asleep, and I slept peacefully all night and into the next morning. I awoke late and turned over to see Ethan already up and gone. I glanced at the clock and realized it was beyond 7:31, and I would be late if I didn't get started. I rushed out of bed and dressed, hurried downstairs to discover no coffee, and muttered a few unpleasant epithets about Ethan's lack of regard under my breath. Both twins were up, dressed, and ready for school, but they did not say anything to me. I missed it because I was preoccupied with my own issues. That night, when Ethan arrived home, I noticed he was quite quiet. In addition, both Lily and Mason seemed aloof and anxious. I inquired what the issue was, but they both denied any issues. I decided to let it go and question Ethan once they got up. I walked into the den and worked on the still unfinished translation till late. When I went out to locate Ethan, he had already gone up to bed. I thought it was time to speak with him, so I turned out the lights and followed. I didn't even know what time it was. The first thing I saw when I got up was that Ethan was sitting on the bed, but he hadn't undressed. That was weird since he had clearly been awake for some time, but he was simply sitting there with no book open or anything else occupying his attention. He only glanced at me as I entered the room. I paused and glanced back, attempting to control my growing displeasure. I eventually asked him, forgetting that this was precisely what I had intended to do in the first place, ironic, but not to me at the moment. What's going on, Ethan? You've been so quiet all evening, and so have the twins. You were gone this morning without waking me, and you didn't even fix coffee. The twins were quiet this morning as well. What's going on, Ethan? Why would I wake you, Sophia? He growled, his voice low and calm but piercing. Didn't you lash out at me last night about keeping my damned hands to myself, not letting you get some sleep? I'm just so tired, Sophia, and I can hardly keep my eyes open. I just wanted to sleep, that's all. I didn't mean to yell at you. It was just that I was so tired. I'm sorry I upset you. I know you were tired, Sophia, he remarked, with a harsh tone. I guess your job is so important that you forget that you need time to yourself. A lot of time every evening now. It seems you just go into that den, and that's the last we see of you. We just can't compete with your precious job anymore. The sudden surge of anger caught me off guard, and before I could control myself, I said, well, pardon me all to hell. I guess I should just forget my job, the people who depend on me, and just say that my husband needs some attention, so I have to stop everything and give it to him. Well, guess again, Buster. Before the echo of my final words faded, Ethan stood and brushed by me without speaking. I stood there, stunned by my own comments and unsure what had just transpired. I was astonished and couldn't move. After what felt like decades, I strolled over to the bed and slumped. My brain was whirling and my thinking was jumbled. I was astonished and mortified by my reaction. I attempted to figure out what I did and why I did it, but nothing came to mind. I was unclear about what to do. Should I go downstairs and apologize to Ethan? Should I simply wait for him to come upstairs and then apologize? I undressed and prepared for bed while waited for Ethan to come up. I'd apologize and attempt to make it up to him. I was well aware that what I said was unacceptable. I would just lay here and wait for him. That was my final thought before the alarm awakened me the following morning. I lay over and pressed the alarm before the memories of last night returned to me. I went over to where my spouse was sleeping and saw the blankets untouched. Ethan had not been to bed at all. I got up, put on a robe, and rushed downstairs to locate him, but he had already gone for work. It was an hour earlier than usual, but he had left. I worried all day at work, but by the time I was ready to leave for home, the urgency had subsided. I apologized to Ethan when he got home from work that evening, and he appeared to accept it, but he was never the same again. Yes, I think that's when things started to shift. As I recall, it took over 3 months to complete the project, and things never seemed to return to normal. That was around a year ago, give or take a month. Yes, that's when everything changed. I first observed Ryan Faulkner, a summer intern at the business, as I was ready to go out for lunch one day. He was in his early 20s and anxious to create a name for himself. He worked as a clerk for many of the partners. He introduced himself and then asked if I might assist him with a translation. I agreed, and I was pleased by his persistence and ability to grasp concepts rapidly. Ryan became a mainstay at the business. He would stop by during his breaks to talk, and as time went, I realized he was flirting with me. I wasn't sure how to respond at first. After all, there was a huge age difference between us, but his attention was undeniably appealing. I knew I was over 18 years older than him, but he didn't seem to care. He didn't treat me like I was much older. It was as if the age gap didn't exist. The more we spoke, the more time we spent together, and the bolder our flirting became. He was a handsome man, over 6 feet tall, thin, with dark brown hair and blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. I found myself thinking about him more than I wanted to admit, but I convinced myself it was just for fun and wouldn't go anywhere. I was married to Ethan, and I loved him, but our relationship had been challenging. Ryan would often congratulate me, telling me how lovely he thought I was, how I stood out from the young females he normally dated, and how much he respected my maturity. He informed me that most females his age were just interested in having fun, but I was different, and I was the kind of woman who knew what was genuine. His remarks made me feel noticed, something Ethan hadn't done in months. As things with Ryan progressed at work, my 38th birthday approached in a month. Ethan mentioned it one evening when we were with the twins, and I disregarded it as insignificant. Ethan inquired about my preferences and if I wanted to do anything special. After some contemplation, I determined that all I wanted to do was ignore it. I informed him and made him swear not to celebrate with the kids. He attempted to address it, but I was not in the mood, so I shouted at him. He stopped talking about it and seemed upset when he claimed he wouldn't bring it up again. Both Lily and Mason were agitated, but I didn't pay any attention. I just forgot about it, like I had been doing recently. It was almost my birthday, and I had observed nothing unusual at home. So my desires were being fulfilled, but I wasn't sure how I felt about it. That was exactly what I wanted, wasn't it? Not to do anything. At that time, it was now. As I told Ryan about it, I gave the impression that Ethan had just pushed me aside and opted not to do anything. How did I get to that? I hadn't a clue. I suppose in my confused reasoning, I was attempting to lessen my husband's pain while dragging Ryan into my delusion. I believe I had already begun to explain my emotions of abandonment by placing the blame on Ethan. I knew none of it was true, but in my mind, it all started to pile up, and my animosity grew. I exploited my friendship with Ryan to release my rage and frustration. Ryan was the ideal foil for my resentments. He listened. He sympathized with me. He made beautiful remarks about my appearance and that he would never abandon me as Ethan did. He never missed an opportunity to diminish Ethan or elevate me as an attractive lady. Even though he was considerably younger than me, he claimed to understand my situation and requirements. He informed me that females his age were superficial and simply interested in having fun. I was more mature and knew what was genuine. By the end of the month, before my birthday, Ethan and I had explored the possibility of meeting outside of work. I mentioned my weekly mall excursion and asked if he wanted to join me for a drink later. He agreed, and we made plans. That Sunday, I had my list and was going fast around the mall since I was acquainted with every business. I typically appreciated this alone time, but recently I've been enjoying it even more. Although I was shopping for all of us, I was alone, and I enjoyed exploring the store displays without having to rush or accommodate someone else's schedule. I was nearly done when I felt a touch on my shoulder and turned to see Ryan standing behind me. I grinned as a rush of pleasure passed through me. I was glad to see him, and we spoke as I made my way to my next destination. I stepped in, Ryan close by me, and I confessed that I was happy that this young guy was so eager to be with me. After the first shop, where I found everything I needed, it was a delight to share my finds with someone who was interested. The day flew fast, and when I finished, I realized how rapidly time had disappeared. It was now 4:31 p.m., and I needed to leave to go home in time for dinner, so I regrettably informed Ryan that our drinks would have to wait. He went out with me and helped me take my goods to the vehicle. Once there, I filled the trunk and closed the lid. As I turned, I stepped directly into Ryan's extended arms. He drew me in close and kissed me so passionately that I couldn't resist. We kissed for a few minutes in the mall's parking lot. His adolescent body crushed against mine, and I could feel his hardness against my stomach. I liked the sensation and imagined what it would be like, so youthful and eager. I eventually pushed him back and glanced at him, surprised. Ryan clasped both of my hands in his and returned my gaze. "Stay with me, Sophia. I'll get us a room so you can stay. I want to make love with you so badly. Please, Sophia, stay." I was taken aback by his offer, but it gradually drew me in. I found myself wanting to do this, be with him, and remain with him. But I knew Ethan and the twins were expecting me home, and if I remained, they would be concerned and would contact me to find out where I was. I saw no reason to remain away. I didn't have an excuse that would please my spouse. I needed to make sure he couldn't find out if I stayed. No, I couldn't do this now, but, please, Ryan, let me think. I can't do this today or anytime soon, without plans. I'm married, and it's not so simple for me. I have people who are expecting me. Let me go now. I'll talk to you at work next week. Just let it be for now, but I will think about it, Ryan. I will. I think I want this too. Without waiting for his response, I rushed to the driver's side door and slipped inside, closing it behind me. I started the engine and immediately backed away, almost without looking. Fortunately, I was clear, so I pulled out and drove away without looking back. I drove home with my goods, and by the time I got into my driveway, my mind had relaxed, allowing me to enjoy the rest of the weekend with my family without suspicion. Actually, if I had noticed, I would have seen Ethan was not paying attention to me. We had already broken apart, and I had never noticed. I spoke with Ryan throughout the following 3 weeks, convincing him that I was still contemplating his offer. We stuck to our normal pattern and went to lunch on numerous occasions. We kissed numerous times, each more passionate than the previous one, and my desire to be with him grew. During our kisses, we made increasing amounts of bodily contact, and I could sense his erection. He even touched my breasts on occasion, and he typically held my buttocks in his hands. I seized him in my hands as he groaned with want, but we only made contact through our garments. At the end of the month, simply seeing him made me wet. I eventually decided to see him in the afternoon on the Sunday I had booked my weekly shopping excursion. Ryan suggested acquiring the majority of the products in advance, a few at a time. He just advised that I start the list early and get the products they recommended. That way, my vacation would be no different from those at home, and I'd have more time to spend with Ryan. I promised to do so and spent the following 3 weeks buying practically everything on the list before that Sunday. Ryan informed me that he had secured a room at a hotel a block from the mall and that we would meet, complete the few things that remained, and then drive to the motel in separate vehicles. I agreed, and our plans were finalized. My reverie was interrupted when I arrived to the mall. I questioned myself again whether this was what I wanted to do. I had no problem in telling myself, yes. I drove into the mall parking lot and circled around to the part outside Nordstrom. I approached Ryan's bright red Toyota convertible and parked up alongside him. He waved and moved around his vehicle, sliding into the seat next me. He leaned over and pulled me close to him while kissing me passionately. I reciprocated his kiss and parted my lips to let his tongue inside me. We parted ways and went into the mall together while his tongue darted in and out of my lips in fast movements, taking care not to do too much in the vehicle in public. I finished my shopping in record time, with Ryan close alongside me the whole time. When I finished the final thing on my list, he bent down and kissed me. Okay, you know where to go. I'm so horny I can't wait any longer. I'll see you there. With that, he swung around and almost raced out of the shop, laughing. I paid the money for my goods and proceeded to the vehicle. I put the suitcases in the trunk and started the vehicle. I sat there for a few minutes, just chatting to myself one more time. Did I want to do this? That disagreement was brief, and before I had time to reconsider my choice, I drove to the Holiday Inn and around the back to the final row of doors, room 158. Ryan whispered the number to me before running out. I parked in front of the room, reached behind me for the tiny suitcase I'd packed and left in the vehicle, and knocked on the door. Ryan responded nearly before I knocked twice. He dragged me in while giggling. I took a short, remorseful glance around before closing the door. Ryan grabbed me as I got inside and was all hands and mouth for the next several minutes. It felt like high school all over again. I just had a second to wonder what I was doing here when his fingers engulfed me and all resistance vanished. I helped him get rid of my clothing. The second thing I noticed was that he felt just like Ethan within me. I believe most males were the same size and their equipment was largely the same. He couldn't endure much longer. He gradually relaxed, then drew away and turned over on his back. After catching his breath, he said, "Holy Jesus, that was outstanding. God, I've never released so hard in my life." I laid there, hot and eager, and the youngster was finished. Not so fast. I lifted my elbows and stared down at his moist face. "You may be done, Junior, but I'm hanging here and nothing else. Where the hell are the condoms I told you to bring? You left me hanging, and I expect you to fix that and fix it very quickly, like right now." With that, I drew him over and grasped his hand. "If you can't get it up yet, then please me with your finger till I am satisfied. Hurry up, then we can do it with the condoms and you can take a little more time for me this time." Ryan caught the hint and performed exactly what I asked for. I walked into the bathroom to clean up. I was not going to take any risks that Ryan's proof would seep out and defraud me. My spouse was never going to find out about this. Ryan was already laying down when I returned from the restroom. "I'm ready to go again, so come over here, and this time you can do the honors." I grinned at the scene within. This may be a lot of fun. His youth gave him one significant edge over Ethan. He could be ready in no time. I gently climbed and then sank, repeatedly. I felt a beautiful sensation spread gently across my body. I like having control over the speed and ensuring my satisfaction. We spent the next 4 hours together in that room, screwing in every possible position. I felt like a woman possessed, driven to do whatever I could think of. As I cleaned up and put my lipstick and mascara back on, I realized it was now past 6. I nearly panicked. My regular time of arrival home was 4 or 4:31 at the latest, but I hadn't noticed the time passing. I grabbed for my phone, but thought it was too late to call. I ran out of the restroom, completely clothed and ready to return home. I would have to make up a tale to appease Ethan. Ryan was dressed as I entered the room. He was chuckling. "This afternoon has been the best day of my life. You are fantastic, and I hope we can do this again very soon." I asked myself the same question as I reapplied my lipstick. Should I try this again? When I explored my sentiments, I sensed a little seed of guilt attempting to escape. I decided I needed time to respond to his query. "I don't know, Ryan. This was great, and I enjoyed the time with you, but I'm married, and I don't know how I feel about cheating on my husband." Ryan attempted to persuade me that it was just sex and had nothing to do with my marriage, but I wasn't convinced. We parted ways, and I vowed to speak to him next week. He watched me drive away, and when I turned back, he was standing behind his vehicle, waving. I drove home, reflecting on the day and the experiences I experienced. I knew I didn't love Ryan and never would. I loved Ethan, but we were experiencing challenges which we needed to work on. I enjoyed my time with Ryan, but I believe there was little difference in sex between Ryan and Ethan. Ethan and I made love, or at least we did until the latest issues. Ryan had more stamina, but Ethan had more finesse. The only reason I liked this day was because Ryan's sex was clandestine, which sparked a little amount of excitement. But as I drove into the driveway, my final thought was it really worth the risk of ruining my marriage? I strolled inside the home, my thoughts focused on Ryan and our time together. I was so preoccupied with my thoughts that I didn't see the empty boxes in the garage, the clutter in the kitchen, or the mounds of dishes in the sink. As I strolled through the kitchen and down the hallway, I failed to see the additional seats in the living room or the banner spread across the family room over the fireplace. My thoughts elsewhere, I hurried upstairs to my bedroom to change my clothing and remove the tight pants and see-through shirt before Ethan could see. I was singing to myself, the joy of my day with Ryan still racing through my veins, and the heat of our time together was burning my cheeks. I could also feel the ache between my legs, and I knew I'd feel much worse tomorrow. I felt it was a good thing Ethan and I hadn't been intimate for a while. He'd be unlikely to detect anything incorrect. I stepped into the bedroom and nearly ran into Ethan, who was standing just inside the doorway. I paused in astonishment as I took in his presence. "Ethan, you scared me. What are you doing standing there?" I was starting to worry. My top was half off, and I knew that Ethan could see the blouse and my tight trousers if he looked. I hurriedly pulled my top down again, attempting to get by him. It was not to be, as he stopped my route and then asked me an unexpected question. "Where were you? Where have you been, and who were you with?" Ethan's harsh and nasty tone stole my breath away. I paused, took a step back, and peered into his eyes. My initial reaction was that they were chilly and rough. Ethan's eyes were as unusual as I had ever seen them. He had light grey eyes that usually sparkled when he gazed at me, but they suddenly seemed darker, less lively, and more steel grey than before. Why did his eyes seem so different? As his words entered, I gasped and assumed he knew. But he couldn't know. I had been so cautious, so certain of myself. I'd never mentioned Ryan in my chats, our lunches, or our time at work. No, he had no clue where I was that afternoon. He was merely annoyed because I was late. I needed to go on the offensive. "What are you talking about, Ethan?" "I was at the mall all afternoon. The packages are in the car, and I need you or Mason to go get them. They are in the trunk, and I was by myself, just like always. I'm sorry I'm so late, but I had some trouble finding everything and then decided to get a bite to eat before coming home. That's all." Ethan did not say anything. He grabbed my hand and took me out of the room, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. I attempted to resist, but he didn't even stop. He wasn't very gentle, but I was almost frightened to say anything to him. I staggered after him, my pulse pounding in my chest, and I had difficulty breathing. Naturally, I began to feel a profound fear in the pit of my stomach. Ethan paused in the center of the kitchen and pointed. "Look, what do you see?" "What do you see, Sophia?" I glanced around and observed the dishes and boxes, as well as the lettering on the sides of some of the boxes, which indicated a catering firm. There were containers filled with food and pastries, some stacked inside others. The meal was rotten. I glanced around and realized how much I missed when I returned home. My thoughts were still in the hotel room with Ryan. I glanced around and saw the chairs and banner from where I was standing in the kitchen. Now I realized what had occurred. There was a celebration for me, and while everyone was there, I was in bed with him. How can I explain this? What could I say, and why did Ethan and the twins do this when I ordered them not to? Of course, they would continue to attempt to celebrate my birthday. They would do this for me because they loved me. Oh God. Oh God, what have I done? What have I done? Then the tears flowed, the anguish of my cheating smashing into me so deeply. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't come home on time. It was just a mistake, and I'm so sorry, but I didn't know you were going to have a party. You should have told me, and I would have been home. I'll let everyone know it was my fault." Ethan wasn't moving. He continued to look at me, his gaze icy. I could feel the sensation of dread growing. To divert Ethan's focus away from me, I needed to get beyond this and make amends. I felt vulnerable and uncertain of myself. I had to rush upstairs and change so I could work on Ethan and make him forget about it. Ethan, let me get changed and then you can tell me who was here, so I can. Ethan stopped me with his next statement. Who were you with? I asked you before and you didn't answer me. Who were you with today? I was by myself, I informed him. I told you that. Why are you asking me this? I determined to assault him to compensate for my misunderstanding. Why would he ask me that instead of being distracted? I inquired. Ethan bit his lip. Who were you with this afternoon for 6 hours in room 158 at the Holiday Inn? Who were you screwing in that room today? Answer me that, Sophia, answer me that. Oh God, he knew. He knew everything. Oh my God, my God. I could not respond. I couldn't make my thoughts operate. All I could hear were those dreadful words from Ethan's lips. I was choking. My throat was constricting and my eyes were burning. My terror was so acute that I nearly collapsed. Ethan was upset and I didn't know what to do. What can I say? What could I do? I needed to do something. I needed to do something. But before I could say or do anything, Ethan approached me, reached down and grabbed my shirt by the bottom edge, ripping it up and over my head. I attempted to conceal myself, but Ethan was having none of it. He took my hands and pushed them apart. Then, in an unexpected move, he pulled apart the blouse, revealing the bite scars and bruises where Ryan had bitten and squeezed me. The thrill I had felt before, the pleasure I had felt when Ryan was manipulating me, was vanished. Now I simply felt agony, my shame total. I wept and pushed past Ethan, returning upstairs and into the bathroom, but he followed me and held the door open as I attempted to shut it. I was weeping and pleading for him to go, but he refused. I walked inside nevertheless and removed my tight jeans. I had bathed myself before returning home. I hadn't realized that my panties were gone. I had forgotten that in my rush to get out of those stupid jeans, I had handed Ryan my bra and panties as a memento of our time together. As I stood there nude and exposed to my husband, the signs of my adultery obvious to him, I understood that Ethan was aware of everything. I believed I had done a great job of concealing myself and that this afternoon would be both my secret and rescue. Now I knew better and I felt humiliated. Now that everything was done and I'd been apprehended, I began to worry about what may happen. Until now, I had only considered my pleasure, my unlawful intents, and what I might gain from it. But I had never considered the repercussions of exposure. Never once had I considered what I may lose. I never considered the ramifications of my conduct that day. I grabbed for my robe, which I kept behind the door for after a shower, and put it on. I wrapped it tight over my body, attempting to conceal the evidence of my adultery from Ethan. Even that wasn't enough, so I pulled my arms securely about my chest and hung on. I could not look at Ethan. I couldn't face the eyes I'd seen below. I couldn't bear to see his agony, his lust expression, and I didn't want him to look at me. I was immediately ashamed of my nakedness and I was embarrassed for my husband to see me. I just wanted to cover myself and escape from his knowing gaze. I desired it, but it was not to be. Get yourself downstairs right now. We have things to talk about, and we have to do it now. Lily and Mason are with your mother for the night. She took them when she left. They were here along with my parents for the party. Ethan, what? Ethan ignored me and walked out the door and down the stairs, leaving me standing there. I had no idea what to do, and I didn't want to have the talk I knew was coming. I assumed that if I didn't go down, it wouldn't start. But, like my dumb choice today, I realized it was a silly thinking. I moved gently down the steps, clutching onto the railing to avoid falling. My legs were unsteady and I felt dizzy. I strolled slowly into the kitchen, moved aside a stack of boxes without caring where they landed, and sat down at the table. Ethan was already seated and gazing at the tabletop. As I glanced at him, I was relieved that I couldn't see his eyes anymore, but I did saw a tear slide down his face. It stole my breath away. How could a single tear achieve that? But it did, and it told me more than 1,000 words ever could. I understood then that my selfish acts had caused significant harm to Ethan, and I saw the consequences of my actions vividly. My sense of fear was now fully operational. What do the children know, Ethan? What do they know? Please tell me. I hoped against hope that they knew nothing. They know, Sophia. I'm sorry, but they know. Ethan continued to avoid looking at me, but his words hit me hard. Why would you tell them, Ethan? Why would you hurt them before talking to me? Why would you do that? I didn't tell them, Sophia. They overheard your sister tell me. It was an accident, really. Just a stupid accident. Olivia just stumbled into it. It was her job to follow you today, to make sure you didn't come home too early when we were still setting up, and then to let us know when you started for home so we could get ready to spring up and yell, surprise. When you walked through the door. She was just protecting our surprise for you. Ethan sat up straight, his eyes locked on me. Without thinking, I saw how red his eyes had become. I asked myself why they were red. I answered my own question by sobbing, of course. How dumb of me. Olivia followed you, and then when she saw you with some man, she got interested. She followed the two of you out to your car and watched you kiss him. She said the way you were kissing told her that something was wrong. She ran to her car and got it in time to follow your car to the Holiday Inn, a couple of blocks away. She watched you and that man go into room 158 and then waited for 10 minutes. When you didn't come back out, she walked up to the room and was able to. Ethan was now emotionless. He continued, his voice becoming colder with each word he spoke. My sister had given me this information. She drove home to tell me what she saw. She was sobbing and almost hysterical, but she wasn't going to tell me. I made her sit down, take a breath, and then tell me what was bothering her. She didn't want to, knowing it was going to hurt me, but with everyone here and waiting to surprise you, she had little choice. As she was telling me what she saw, I looked around and saw Lily and Mason standing there. They had heard it all. They heard it all, Ethan said, his voice flat and cold. Oh God, Ethan, what did they do? What did they say? Oh God, what have I done? I exclaimed, dread rising in my breast. They were crushed when they heard Olivia tell me what you were doing, Ethan said, his voice as chilly as ever. Lily broke down and cried, and Mason just stood there, cursing. I didn't even try to stop him. I let them alone until they were done, and once they had let it out, I tried to talk to them and calm them down. It took some time, but eventually, I had Olivia talk to your mom and dad to let them know what happened. That had to be done so that they could handle Lily and Mason tonight. I listened in complete terror. How had everything gone apart so fast and completely? One afternoon, a simple choice to do something I had never considered before, and this was the outcome. My family was destroyed, my parents and children were aware of everything, and my husband was standing here, telling me what he knew. My heart wrenched as I recognized the enormity of the situation. The past several months, if not years, had led up to this moment. My selfish acts had set me on a course that had resulted in complete chaos. The guilt was excruciating, yet I was still selfish enough to attempt to rationalize my actions, believing that somehow I could make it right, repair what I had done. But deep down, I knew it was too late. I stopped sobbing and tried to get myself together. I had to do anything I could to set things right. Ethan, what now? Can you ever find it in your heart to forgive me? I swear to you, this was the first and only time I've ever done anything like this, and I can promise you it will never happen again. Never. I rose up and moved around the table to be close to Ethan. I placed my hand on his shoulder to soothe him, but he pulled me away. I stepped back, my surprise at his rage bringing fresh tears to my eyes as I waited for his response. I don't think that's possible right now, Sophia, he said. You see, I made a mistake today as well. When Olivia told me what you were doing, I had to see for myself. I didn't believe you would do something like that to us. I just couldn't believe it, so I went to the motel myself while the party was breaking up. I parked my car and walked up to room 158 and looked for the break in the curtains that Olivia told me about. I found it, and I looked. Oh God, no. You didn't see me, Ethan, I said, my throat tightening. I saw you, Sophia. I saw you on that bed, him behind you with both of his hands on your breasts as he slammed into you over and over. And the look on your face was enough to make me sick. You were consumed with lust and your face was twisted in a way I never saw before. Oh yes, Sophia, I saw you, and it broke my heart. Ethan was openly weeping now, tears streaming down his cheeks and pouring over the tables. I saw them and realized it was too late. He got up, went upstairs and returned down with 2 luggage. He had packed earlier and now he was prepared. I'm leaving now, Sophia. I'll file the papers first thing Tuesday morning. We can split everything evenly, including custody of the kids. Since this is a no-fault state, there should be no problem. Lily and Mason already know my intentions and they've accepted it. They are old enough to get by. I don't know what you'll tell them, but I trust you with that at least. I didn't say much other than that I couldn't accept what you had done and that I needed to file for divorce. We discussed it. They wanted to test if I couldn't go beyond this, but I informed them it was impossible. Finally, they agreed to remain with you. They are nice kids and they will not hold it against you for long. They are young and they will forgive and forget. They will. But I cannot, Sophia. I just can't. Ethan, please do not do this. I love you with all of my heart and I apologize. I vow I'll do whatever to make it up to you. Please do not leave me like this. We have 2 amazing children that require both of us. Ethan, please give me another opportunity. I was weeping and choking on my words, but I knew I had to try, even if it was too little, too late. But as he looked at me and I saw the agony in his eyes and the lack of hope, I knew his response. I'm sorry, Sophia, but I just can't do it. I can't. Ethan's lawyer refused to let me speak with him before signing the divorce papers, but his lawyer assured me that the divorce would proceed regardless of whether or not Ethan was present. The courts don't ask for counseling, even though I begged Ethan's lawyer to join me in therapy, and they don't ask for conversations or compromises either. I had no answer for that, and I never spoke to Ryan again. When he found out about my divorce, he left the firm, and I never heard from him again, which was fine with me because I no longer cared about him. I tried to talk to Ethan, but he quickly shut me down. Ethan walked out on my 38th birthday 5 years ago, and I still remember everything from the moment I walked out. The kids were a problem for a while, but they soon forgave me, just as Ethan said. Mason was worse than Lily, but he eventually got over it, though we aren't as close as we used to be, which I hope will change with time. Thank you for watching. Do you believe the characters' actions were justified? Please let us know in the comments and remember to like and subscribe.